Professor, during that time. I clearly remember you in one of these statements that you did while you were still Minister of Information. You surely, and you certainly say that surely Emerson Mnangagwa is not an automatic vice president after, is not an automatic president after President Mugabe. This was one of the reasons that actually caused fissures with you and Mnangagwa, where you were caught, where you were caught on record saying that he's surely not the next successor to Mugabe. Who was your preferred successor during that time? If there was any succession plan to be done, what would you have preferred?
Well, I was correct. Even as I sit here, I'm happy to associate myself with that view, which I expressed in December 2014, soon after the Congress. I just wanted to make clear then that Emerson Mnangagwa's appointment, it was not even an election, appointment as vice president did not make him, the appointment, I said, was not an anointment. But that was not to eliminate him as a possible successor, of course not. But it was simply to say to those who were jumping up and down that from a political point of view, his appointment is not an anointment, because to be president of Zimbabwe, or of ZANU-PF even at that time, before the coup, now the coup has changed all that, you needed to be elected, not to be anointed or appointed president even. And you know what? I'm happy to answer your question, who was my choice. But I don't want you to run away with the imagination that therefore, because this was your choice, it means X, Y, Z in terms of the politics of the moment. Because if we play fair, the one who succeeds must be the one who commands the majority of support in the first instance from the party, and in the second from the country. For me, and in ZANU-PF terms, the most appropriate successor would have been Sydney Sekeramayi. Why? I knew, as I think did others, that because of the intricate relationship between the military and national politics, against the background that the military was led by ex-freedom fighters, war veterans, the Zandla ones in particular, and there were many then. Some were retired after the coup. But because they were the key factor, there was no possibility for a transition from Mugabe to the next president if that president did not enjoy the support of the military hierarchy. It was out of the question. Much as one would have looked at different possible scenarios, all these other scenarios of either a youth or some Mafikizolo or someone with a better vision and so forth were a non-starter because they were not going to be supported by the military. And the inextricable link between and intertwined link between the military and ZANU-PF dictated that you be sober in trying to come up with a scenario of what would be a possible succession or transition from Mugabe to the next leader with a realistic chance of success. And I have to tell you, the idea that you could have the former First Lady as a successor was a completely zero because of this test. This was a fundamental test that as far as ZANU-PF was concerned, And as far as the situation was in 2017, it was not possible for anyone to succeed Robert Mugabe if that person was not supported and or was not a product of the political complex that defined ZANU-PF. And then when we looked at these people, in this case, when I looked at these people, I could not see anyone else who would fit the bill in a manner that would balance the various sensitive and contentious issues and interests that bedeviled ZANU-PF in 2017. And I have to make it very clear to you, as far as I was concerned, and I dare say, as far as the majority of ZANU-PF members were concerned, they were not willing to contemplate the possibility of Mugabe being succeeded by his right-hand man for 52 years, named Mnangagwa. Mnangagwa was out of question as an ideal and or desirable successor to Mugabe. That is not to say Mnangagwa did not wish or plan or intend to succeed Mugabe. That is also not to say there were no people in the military political complex who supported him. It simply meant, in terms of the balance of forces, the balance of interests, it is very dangerous for a leader who has been in power for 37 years to be succeeded by his right-hand man for 52 years. That's not a succession. That's a continuation. That's a repetition. But to make a long story short, Mnangagwa is the one who was the Minister of State Security from 1980 to 1990. And Zimbabwe, for that period, was under a continuous state of emergency. The Rhodesian state of emergency, which was brutal, which was responsible for suspending the fundamental rights of Zimbabweans, responsible for triggering the liberation struggle, was continued for that long, for 10 years. And the minister who superintended that law is Mnangagwa. And during that period, that's the genocide period, the Guguraundi genocide period. In any reasonable country, someone with that association would not lift his hand 27 years later to say, I want to be president of this country. They would retire quietly. But should they lift their hand and say, I want to be president, what they will be saying is, I want to defend my atrocities. I want to cover up. That is the only reason they would show their hand to say no. But in any normal country, that would not happen. Now, was anyone in ZANU-PF and anyone who was a member of the ZANU-PF Central Committee in 1982 was part of the declaration, the Guguraundi Declaration. The Guguraundi deployment and in particular the deployment of the 5th Brigade was approved by the ZANU-PF Central Committee. And so Sekeramayi was part of that thing. He was also the defense minister. But we know that, yes, he had some strange rhetoric and so forth. But if you go back to that period, you will find him saying stupid things in the newspapers and parliament, but not on the ground, touching people whom he is accusing to be dissidents by his own bare hands. And those people disappearing and being unaccounted for after he has done that, you will not find Sekeramayi having done that. But more seriously, among ZANU-PF, and we're not talking about non-ZANU-PF people, among ZANU-PF, Sekeramayi has been, for the better part of his political life, a moderate, one who has, in subsequent years, been remorseful, willing to accept, and one who, for those of us who joined the ZANU-PF leadership ranks in the early 2000s period, the turn of the century, we found the ZAPU leaders, ZIPRA leaders, much more understanding and forgiving of Sekeramayi than they were of Mnangagwa. They had a much better relationship with him. Some of us, like me, I wasn't part of that circle. But I could see that, unfortunately, by the time I joined the ranks, the late Vice President Nkomo had passed on in July of 1999, as you know. So I come in, the leaders there of ZAP and ZIPRA are Joseph Msika, Tenjiwe Lesabe, John Nkomo, Tumiso Dabengwa. These people had no kind words from Mnangagwa, had no meaningful relationship of any kind with Mnangagwa because of the Guguraundi issue and because of how he unleashed the Rhodesian state of emergence on them. But they had a very practical working relationship with Sekeramayi, a very practical, and they had explanations that from a rational political point of view, you could understand that, they have neither forgotten nor forgiven Mnangagwa, but they've not forgotten, but have forgiven Sekeramayi. And Sekeramayi's own conduct was of humility, of acceptance, and a willingness to deal with the situation, not to sweep it under the carpet. Now, there was also a very big difference between how the CIO as an institution, as an organization, behaved under Mnangagwa versus how it behaved under Sekeramayi. The CIO was the lead organization in Guguraundi. It is the one which used to point to villages and homesteads to be destroyed, attacked, and for the villagers to be brutalized, killed by the 5th Brigade. And in a number of cases, it's the CIO which used to torture people to death under Mnangagwa. And we have the details where even where Mnangagwa would involve himself. Now, for that reason, and for the subsequent relationship that Sekeramayi was showing in terms of different interest groups, political groups, which were not ZANU-PF, he seemed to be out of a terrible background, terrible situation, a rotten plate, to stand out as one who would carry the transition without the unreasonable and violent reaction of the military or military elements or securocrats, where and open some new space and also be willing to deal with the unfinished business, because you can never ever sweep genocide under the carpet. And in ZANU-PF, the question of Guguraundi is very difficult to deal with. And you can see how the Mnangagwa people react even today. They don't want to hear about it. They lie. Let's talk about it. But you dare open your mouth. Then they come after you. I have never heard anyone, whether it's Ipechu or even the new human rights organizations that have come up in Zimbabwe. Mnangagwa, every April, when he does the Mugabe interview, type of interview on that is done on the eve of independence, he talks about Gugraundi and says, let's talk about it. Let's be free to talk about it. He says that in order to find out who is talking about it so that they go after you. No one who has talked about it has gotten away with it and been given the platform on ZBC, through the Zim Papers platform. No, you can't, even you sitting there, you cannot tell me that look at how they've given so-and-so and allowed so-and-so space to talk about what happened. Anyone who has something to say about Gugraundi as a survivor or a victim has a story that they don't want to hear. Why? Because by its very nature, the story is just so horrific, inhumane. They will be like, oh no, really, no, they don't want to hear. They don't want to hear. We needed a president who truly would want to hear that kind of thing, but not this scenario that we have. Therefore, for me, I did not think that Sekeramayi was the best because he was an angel or because he had nothing to do with it, but because those who came after me, who were in leadership and some who bore the brunt of these things, came to terms and some understanding with him. And I am a direct witness of that. I know what Joseph Msika thought about Sekeramayi. I know firsthand, not from being told. I know what John Nkomo thought about Sekeramayi firsthand, not being told. And I know why, because of the evidence that we, and I also know that it was not possible to say, no, I can't have Mnangagwa, I can't have Sekeramayi, I need Kasukuere or Joao or Grace Mugabe, or I even need myself. All those possibilities would have been sheer and utter madness, because you would be provoking a situation. The very fact that Mnangagwa had to use military weapons to grab the power demonstrates the point I'm making. And he grabbed the power not because he had this vision 2030 and all that. No, Mnangagwa grabbed power not because of the future, but because of the past, to keep the lead on the past.
So we are officially an hour into the first part, first segment of this interview. I wanted to dovetail a lot into this pre-coup or pre-military assisted phase. Let me just shoot my two last questions before we officially hit an hour in an interview. I thought this was just going to be an hour, but we are still in the first segment, Professor. I just wanted to understand, we hear reports of people who died during the coup or the military-assisted transition, and your house specifically was attacked. We saw some pictures that you've been sharing and some short videos. Do you know of any people who actually died during this period? Those who actually hurt or killed during this period, just out of interest? If you may explain to us the events of the time, if you know any of such individuals.
Well, if you had asked me this question in November 2017, well up to even August 2018, I would have answered it with names. Now that you're asking me 3.5 years later, I will answer you with numbers. At least 25 people were killed.
25?
At least. And I will tell you, President Mugabe was low-key about it until the coup happened on a Wednesday, then which was Wednesday was what again? Was the 15th, isn't it?
Somewhere around there. I'm not so sure. Yeah.
Yes, the 15th was Wednesday, and the coup happens. In fact, it happens on the 14th at night, and people wake up to it on the 15th, and then on that day he starts getting representations from the so-called command element, and he was low-key about it. He did not think that it was going to get out of hand. Then on the 16th, they start briefing him, sending Father Mkonori and George Sharamba to talk to him, to tell him what their deliberations are, and they get alarmed, thinking that we are at the blue roof, and we will use the cover of the roof to come up with other ideas and so forth. They get jittery, and on the 17th, Friday, he goes to HIT for graduation. Well, he was accosted by a number of security people when he got there, some who were in tears. And while there, he got accounts that were horrific of people in the security systems structure who had been killed. High numbers, and that's what changed him, and that's what made him finally realize that something was fundamentally wrong, because there had been bloodshed. But you see, when members of the security system or the security structure are killed, the unfortunate fact and reality about Zimbabwe is that they can suppress that information from coming out into the civilian community.
Were they military?
They started perfecting that from the days of the campaign, well, from Gugrawundi days.
No, I mean those who died during the coup. Which security sector are they coming from?
No, but what I'm saying, I'm understanding the question, but I wanted to emphasize the point that from the Gugrawundi days through the Mozambique campaign, the DRC campaign, they have perfected the art of suppressing the numbers and the facts. And then to your question, mainly from the CIO and some police, as well as some army, the majority from the CIO. The CIO was brutalized because it was perceived to be opposed to the coup. The CIO and the police were seen as anti-coup. But there were some in the military also who didn't support it.
And around 25 of those were killed during that time, so you've just highlighted.
Yeah, I said to you, if you had asked me up to August 2018, I would have given you names. But 3.5 years later, no, because you see, now we can't be offensive even to the families.
Oh, true. No, I understand. Let me just fast track you there. We are still in the first segment, Prof Moyo. Come 13 November, the commander-in-chief then, Vice President Chiwenga, he holds the presser and he says, we are doing this to defend the constitution. This was loud and clear that the military was now full-time involved. Still, we did not see any swift movement towards sanitizing the situation. It seemed all was good and all. Was it lack of strategy, or there was a better strategy that was going on? And some allege that Vice President Chiwenga was supposed to be arrested the minute he came in from China. What was the ongoings during that period?
I want to understand your question. Lack of strategy on whose part?
Specifically on the president, because we didn't see anything happening on the ground. There you go, a military holding a press conference saying that they're going to be defending the constitution, and they were surely not happy about the ongoings within ZANU-PF. This was a clear sign that the military was now activating itself, but still we did not see any kind of intervention or reaction towards this statement. What caused this, and what was really going on? Was there anything else that we didn't know that was going on during the background during this time?
You are not being truthful that there was you saw nothing. Maybe you saw nothing, but honestly admit you had something, because that's that was done, and it precipitated the famous SK Moyo press statement that called that action treasonous. Have you forgotten about that?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, I remember it.
Yeah, and some discerning analysts say that statement by SK Moyo, which characterized the 13th of November presser as treasonous, is what triggered the coup. Although let's face it, and I'm one of those who have said that, by the way. If you read Excelgate, in my analysis, I said that triggered the coup. Because in their coup statement, they actually cite that as a problem to say, now, it's like they give the idea that we tried to intervene, and in so doing, we highlighted what the problems were and who the troublemakers were. What they expected was President Mugabe to say, thank you, we take note, and with immediate effect, I have dismissed from government Jonathan Moyo, Ignatius Chombo, Seve Kasukwere, Patrick Joao, Walter Mzembi, and maybe some others, but especially those. And I have relieved my wife, Grace Mugabe, from the position of Secretary for Women's League, blah, blah, blah. They wanted him to issue something like that. Maybe there would have been no action. But instead of something like that happening, a statement was issued to say, this is a no, you can't do this. Because you've done this, you've committed treason. That was a red line. Right. Because the moment an official statement, SK Moyo issued that statement as Minister of Information, therefore on behalf of government, which meant that the government has taken a position that this is treason. But the government that took a position that this is treason, unfortunately, was no longer in a position to enforce the law. Because treason it was, no doubt about it. And treason it is, even as we sit here talking. Okay. And it can visit them today or tomorrow. That was treasonous, no doubt about it. But treason is a crime that can be alleged by an authority in control. Because it's treason one moment, but if it succeeds, it's freedom. And we have a new reality.
And this was happening.
That is what you see. I've been surprised, and I'm happy you are really pushing the envelope and pinpointing issues that shine a spotlight on this question. Where some scholars outside Zimbabwe, have focused on this issue, there hasn't been a proper debate in Zimbabwe which looks at this kind of question as to what really triggered what and what could have happened and so forth. But certainly the statement by SK that this is treason, it made them, so when they were told it's treason, you know what they did? They camped at KG6, all of them. They said, let's not live here. And they said, let's take over. That thing. And then when they, even when they now were, there's something we call the Coup minutes, which was the first meeting of the commanders on the 15th of November, the morning after the coup. They highlighted that issue to the president. Mkonori and Charamba went to tell Mugabe that ZANU is Zoguti Taita treason as we and it was now the one of their big, it became, so we can debate and discuss.
On that point, Professor, do you support the narrative that this happened 7 days after then Emerson Mnangagwa on the 6th was fired from government. 7 days later, the army holds the presser. That was on the 13th. Do you support the narrative that
Chiwenga even come on the 12th, come back from
exactly.
China?
Yes, exactly. Do you support the narrative that at that moment in time, the army or Chiwengas, they were not ready, neither were they clearly planned any coup? Because it seems like everything.
No. A coup was cooked a long time ago.
Did they have this strategy, or they were then pushed to execute it? Yes, they may have planned it, or they may have it in mind. But do you support the narrative that at that point in time, they were not even ready to execute it, but they were then just pushed because of the pressure, specifically with Treason coming behind them?
Well, in terms of what was happening at the time, clearly the D-Day was going to be end of the year at the ZANU-PF big meeting.
The Congress, yeah.
Clearly their build-up in their plan was going that way. There were certain people who were not going to survive the December meeting politically for sure, but some even existentially. There were some who stood or who were at a real risk and possibility of being physically eliminated. December was the D-Day. The firing of Mnangagwa activated a new situation. The response of the government to the 13th of November presser and characterization of it as treason sealed the deal.
Right. Okay. So now, Prof, I know we have already taken 1 hour, 10 minutes into this. We're supposed to quickly move from the pre-coup, during coup, and then the after-coup period. Very interesting.
But there are some things before you leave. I just want to mention something very important about the pre-period. This period that you're covering, as you know, because it had a background to it. It was not supposed to end up with a government where Mnangagwa was the president, Chiwenga vice president, and Mohadi the other vice president. As part of the plan to have a broad-based sort of coup Mugabe transition movement, there were some serious negotiations that involved the MDC, that involved Twangirai, and on the one hand, and Dumiso Dabengwa on the other hand. In fact, given the diversity and multiplicity of forces that supported the coup, or that were essential to be mobilized to support the coup, if things had gone up to, or according to the plan, Zimbabwe was supposed to have a government where Mnangagwa as president would be president, deputized by Morgan Tsvangirai and Dumiso Dabengwa.
It was a transitional government, so to say.
That was the deal. And I think it's unfortunate that people like to speculate and then don't talk about things. And what killed it is that Dumiso Dabengwa made very clear demands. They used the Air Force, the current Air Force commander, Elson Moyo. He was the go-between the coup makers and Dumiso Dabengwa. And Dumiso Dabengwa made demands about Guguraundi, a final resolution for truth and justice, and then the Matabeleland Zambezi water project, and then devolution. Mnangagwa rejected Dumiso Dabengwa's demands on Guguraundi, on the Matabeleland Zambezi water project, and on devolution. And then Dumiso pulled out of the deal. And so Dumiso was not willing to get into the government without specific commitments on these three issues. Mnangagwa was not willing to commit on those three issues, and the deal collapsed. And Tsvangirai became collateral damage because at that stage, they didn't see him as having any clout to make a demand that they would somehow be troubled with. But Dumiso had clear three demands. That's what killed the thing. And you know, I consider it quite tragic that we have a society that really doesn't face issues the way they are or the way they were, to be honest. You know, Mohadi was a hanger-on. He was not a critical player, although he was a minister of state security before the coup. He was inconsequential. But Dumiso was consequential. And Morgan Tsvangirai bringing the MDC, as it were. And one of the reasons why some of us who are aware of how things were being handled inside ZANU-PF, how people didn't want, I mean, if you wanted to be enemy number one, talk about Guguraundi, talk about devolution, and in those days, when Dumiso was working on the Matabeleland and Zambezi water project, it was seen in tribal terms and all that. Some of us are quite unsettled and disturbed by the fact that now you see people like Virginia Mabiza running around creating phony organizations in Matabeleland with the Jenny Williams of this world to try and pretend that they are tackling Guguraundi and issues of devolution and so forth. It's preposterous because we know Mnangagwa rejected Dumiso Dabengwa's demands. And if he had not if Mnangagwa was committed to dealing with Guguraundi, committed to dealing with devolution, committed to dealing with the Matabeleland and Zambezi water project, Dumiso would have been vice president of Zimbabwe on the 24th of November 2017.
And the Tsvangirai demands also, we didn't see anything materialize. What happened and what would have caused the collapse there? since it didn't have any demands?
Well, they signaled their disdain for the MDC and Tsvangirai on the 18th of November. They used the MDC to mobilize people, especially in Harare, to demonstrate, make demands, and cynically exploited the Mugabe must go mantra. But as they were now addressing those crowds, you will recall that Chinamasa bluntly told them that this is just for ZANU-PF, not you. They were with Dumiso. There were very serious negotiations, and they used an intermediary, the current Air Force commander. With the MDC, they were disdainful, openly disdainful, openly. And I've been surprised that having been treated like that, even as the coup was unfolding on the 18th, the MDC continued, or maybe not the MDC, but some MDC leaders continued to behave as if they were part of something that the architects were already signaling they were not. And up to today, I'm surprised that we don't have MDC leaders who are associated with the coup, who supported the coup, openly coming to say, first, in good faith, we supported that, but then we realized that we were taken for a ride and that our founding leader was abused, and we denounced this. We didn't think it was a military coup. We thought it was a genuine thing, but in fact, it was a military coup, and it is unacceptable. And Zimbabwe, as we speak, is a military state. I mean, it is surprising that they don't want to come clean on this score.
Quite a very historic event, and as well, we saw both houses coming together to even vote out during the HICC event. It seems, in as much as it was almost obvious and clear that they were not going to be working together, still we saw them coming together, and they were trying to also vote. We did see them backing off as well. Yeah.
You are mentioning, in fact, and pointing to a very instructive thing. The motion was to impeach Mugabe was moved by ZANU-PF and seconded by the MDC.
Exactly. And yet it was almost clear that they were not going to be in support of the transitional government.
No, and for me, wearing my hat as a political analyst, I think what was happening there is that the MDC as a party was no longer there. What was now playing was a situation where MDC leaders as individuals who had been co-opted into the ZANU-PF and the Mnangagwa clansmanship Chunu-Chedu project was at play. The people, and so for me as an analyst, I can see that an MDC individual seconded the motion, and that individual who seconded the motion is now a Mnangagwa ambassador somewhere. And then the other individuals who have been who were part of that.
That's my daddy. I will not keep the names out.
Of course, yes. The others have slowly come out of their shells, left MDC when they were very senior positions. I mean, it is unthinkable that Morgan Tsvangirai's MDC spokesperson is now a card-carrying member of ZANU-PF and has gone to have tea with Mnangagwa and has been rewarded with the position of a commissioner at this useless body called the National Peace and Reconciliation Commission, utterly useless and deserving of them. Now, when you see the Lilians, the Chebundus, the Tongais leaving and joining Mnangagwa, they didn't join after the fact. They were already part of that bandwagon, and it calls for a completely different analysis to see or try and understand what was going on. That is why some of us refrain from going overboard about the otherwise inexplicable MDC infatuation with a coup, with a military coup.
Mm-hmm. Well, what a long one we have just heard there, Professor Moyo. We are going to be taking a short break. It is officially 1 hour and some 20-something minutes since we started this show. We're taking a few second break, and then we'll be back to you, all of you who are watching us live right now. This is www.techmec.tv. We're taking the first segment where we're to talk about the pre-coup period, and then the during coup period, and then we're going to be going over as well to cross over to the next stage to understand exactly what happened in the 2018 elections, specifically with Excelgate coming out and how Zimbabwean elections have been alleged or have been proved to have been stolen. Please do stay with us. We are back in the next few seconds.